The entire banquet hall held its breath. Heroine Noah, a 78-year-old Sicilian legend who hadn't set foot in America for 20 years, had just arrived at his son's celebration dinner. And the soft-spoken waitress Hannah Jam, the girl everyone ignored, the one who'd spent 3 years being invisible, had just frozen mid-step when she saw his face. He thought she was just another server. He thought she was nobody. He had no idea she was the ghost of his best friend's daughter, the one everyone believed died 15 years ago. And in exactly 13 minutes, Hannah was going to speak one perfect sentence in a dialect that would stop 200 people cold and change everything. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I have missed you all. Missed all the experiences we've had together. It's been a rough ride as we're currently battling some technical issues, but trust me, we're getting everything back and running. So stick around. I need your support on YouTube now more than ever. Thank you specially for sticking around to this very moment. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. The kitchens of Palazzo d'Oro smelled like roasted lamb, aged wine, and absolute terror. Move, move. If those champagne flutes aren't spotless, I will end your career in this city. Do you understand me? Vincent Corso, the head coordinator, was practically vibrating with stress. He dabbed his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief, his eyes ping-ponging between the wall clock and the grand marble staircase that led down to the main hall. It was 8:34 p.m. They had 26 minutes until the official toast. Hannah adjusted the burgundy vest of her uniform, keeping her chin tucked. She hated events like this. At 24, she'd mastered the art of disappearing in plain sight. She kept her brown hair pulled back in a simple low bun, wore minimal makeup, and had trained herself to move through rooms like air noticed only when you needed her, forgotten the second she stepped away. "Hannah!" Vincent snapped, practically teleporting in front of her. "You're assigned to the head table. Water service only sparkling, still, lemon wedges. Do not speak unless they address you directly. Do not make eye contact for longer than 2 seconds. And for the love of God, do not drop anything. Do you hear me?" "Yes, sir," she whispered. "Do you know who's sitting at that table?" She nodded slowly, her throat tight. "Then you know what happens if you embarrass this establishment." Vincent leaned closer, his cologne overwhelming. "Lee Thomas has spent $500,000 tonight. His father flew in from Sicily for the first time in decades. One mistake, Hannah, and you won't just lose this job, you'll lose every job. Capiche?" "Capiche," she murmured. He stalked off, barking orders at the pastry team. Hannah turned back to her station, fingers trembling as she arranged crystal glasses on a silver tray. She wasn't shaking because of Vincent. She wasn't even shaking because Lee Thomas, the man who controlled half the underground economy in New York, was 20 feet away in the next room. She was shaking because of him. Heroine Noah. The name alone made her chest tighten. She'd spent 15 years burying the memory of that voice, that laugh, those hands that used to ruffle her hair when she was 9 years old and her father called him fratello. Brother. 2 days before her entire family was slaughtered, Heroine Noah had vanished from New York without a word. "Hey," a voice whispered beside her. It was Marco, one of the line cooks, looking concerned. "You good? You look like you've seen a ghost." Hannah forced a tight smile. "I'm fine. Just Vincent's intense tonight." "It's the old man," Marco muttered, checking a tray of cannoli. "Word is, Noah hasn't left Sicily since the 90 seconds. People are calling this the reunion of the century. Every family in the city's watching." Hannah didn't respond. She focused on polishing the rim of a wine glass until it squeaked. Outside, the double doors to the banquet hall suddenly swung open. The kitchen went silent. Even the sizzle of the grills seemed to hush. Vincent rushed back in, face pale, eyes wide. "They're starting the procession. Everyone line up. Now." The Thomas family didn't enter a room. They claimed it. 8 men walked through the arched marble entrance of Palazzo d'Oro's main hall. 6 of them were security massive, stone-faced men in black suits with earpieces, and the kind of stillness that screamed danger. Their eyes swept the room in synchronized patterns, calculating exits, distances, threats, but the 2 men in the center pulled every ounce of oxygen out of the space. On the right was Lee Thomas. He was devastating. 6'4", maybe taller, with a build that filled out his black 3-piece suit like it had been sewn directly onto him. His dark hair was styled back, sharp jawline dotted with a perfectly groomed beard. He had a silver watch on his left wrist that probably cost more than Hannah's entire year of rent, and a single tattoo peeking out from under his collar, something in Latin she couldn't quite read. He didn't look at the staff lined up along the wall. He didn't need to. His presence alone made people straighten their spines. But it was the man beside him who made Hannah's pulse stop. Heroine Noah, older now, 78, with silver hair swept back like a lion's mane and deep lines carved into his face by decades of decisions most people couldn't imagine making. He wore a long black coat over a charcoal suit, and he leaned on a cane topped with a bronze wolf's head. But his eyes were sharp, alive, dangerous, and when his gaze swept across the room, Hannah felt her breath catch in her throat. She dropped her eyes to the floor immediately, heart hammering. Don't look up. Don't move. He doesn't know you. He can't know you. The procession moved slowly toward the head table, a long setup beneath a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a palace. The security team fanned out. Lee pulled out a chair for his father with a gesture that was somehow both respectful and commanding. Heroine Noah sat down with a sigh, resting his cane against the table. And then he did something that made every hair on Hannah's neck stand up. He looked directly at her. Just for a second. Just long enough for her to feel the weight of recognition hovering at the edge of his memory, like he'd seen her face somewhere before but couldn't place it. Then he turned to his son and said something in Italian. Lee's gaze flicked toward her. Hannah's hands went cold. 13 minutes, she thought. Just get through the next 13 minutes. Stay invisible. Stay safe. Stay alive. But deep down, she knew the truth. The moment Heroine Noah had looked at her, her 3 years of invisibility had already started to crack. Sometimes the thing you're running from isn't chasing you, it's waiting for you to slip. One word, one glance, one moment where you forget to be invisible. And that's all it takes for your past to find you. What happens next? Stick around, because in 13 minutes, Hannah's going to say something she can't take back, and the entire underworld is about to realize she's not just a waitress. She's a Conti. Hannah Jam didn't exist 3 years ago. The name was assembled from a phone book and a corner bodega sign in Astoria, Queens. Hannah from the tax attorney on 31st Avenue, Jam from the locksmith 2 blocks down. She'd chosen it specifically because it was forgettable, soft consonants, no ethnic markers, nothing that would make anyone look twice. Her studio apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up that smelled like the Thai restaurant below it. 400 square feet of beige walls, a mattress on the floor, and a single window that overlooked a fire escape where pigeons nested in the spring. She kept exactly 3 photographs in the entire space, all facing down in a drawer she never opened. The rest of her life fit into 2 duffel bags that stayed packed under the bed, just in case she had to run again. Every morning at 5:30, Hannah woke to the sound of delivery trucks rattling down Steinway Street. She'd shower in a bathroom so small she had to step into the hallway to dry off, then dress in clothes designed to erase her, neutral colors, flat shoes, hair pulled back. No jewelry except a small silver cross she'd bought at a thrift store because waitresses in New York wore crosses. It made them seem trustworthy, harmless. She'd learned the rules early. Don't stand out. Don't ask questions. Don't form attachments. Her first job in the city had been at a 24-hour diner in Hell's Kitchen where the cook had a gambling problem and the manager skimmed from the register. She'd lasted 6 months before a regular started asking too many questions about where she was from, why she didn't have any family, why a girl who spoke the way she did was working the graveyard shift. She'd quit the next day and moved across the river. The second job was at a boutique hotel in Brooklyn. Better tips, worse hours. She'd been invisible there too, until one of the concierges noticed she spoke Italian when a guest needed help. He'd gotten curious, started digging, asked about her accent, which region she was from, whether she had family back in the old country. She'd been gone within a week. Palazzo d'Oro had been different from the start. It was the kind of place where the clientele paid for discretion as much as they paid for food. Investment bankers who needed private rooms for meetings that weren't on any official calendar, lawyers celebrating victories they couldn't discuss in public, and occasionally, men in expensive suits who arrived with security details and left envelopes of cash instead of credit card receipts. Vincent Corso, the head coordinator, had hired her on the spot 3 years ago, not because of her resume, which was thin and vague, but because she'd walked into the interview with her eyes down and her voice barely above a whisper. He'd asked her 3 questions, and she'd answered each one with "yes, sir," or "no, sir," and nothing more. "You're exactly what we need," he'd told her. "Someone who knows how to stay out of the way." And she had. For 3 years, Hannah had moved through Palazzo d'Oro like smoke. She knew which tables tipped well and which ones wanted absolute silence. She knew how to read a room, how to sense when a conversation was turning dangerous, when to refill a glass and when to vanish entirely. The other staff barely knew her name. She never went to the after-shift drinks, never shared details about her life, never gave anyone a reason to remember her. It had worked perfectly. Until tonight. Until the moment heroine Noah walked through those doors, and the past she'd buried came roaring back to life. Because the thing about being invisible is that it only works until someone who knew you before decides to really look. The first hour of service went smoothly. Too smoothly. Hannah moved between the tables like a shadow, pouring water with hands that had finally stopped shaking. Lee Thomas sat at the center of the head table, his father to his right, flanked by men whose names she didn't know and didn't want to learn. The conversation flowed in Italian and English, sometimes both in the same sentence, voices low and controlled. She kept her eyes down, refilled glasses before they were empty, existed in the margins. At 9:15, the dessert course arrived. 6 servers emerged from the kitchen carrying silver trays, each one bearing a different traditional Sicilian delicacy. Cannoli filled with sweetened ricotta and pistachios, pignolotta drizzled with honey and lemon glaze, almond cookies dusted with powdered sugar, and at the center of the head table, placed directly in front of heroine Noah, a perfect cassata, the dome-shaped cake layered with ricotta, candied fruit, and marzipan that had been the crown jewel of Sicilian celebrations for centuries. Hannah watched from her position near the water station as Noah's face softened. He reached out and touched the marzipan coating with one finger, almost reverently, and said something to Lee in Sicilian that made his son smile. That's when Marcus Pellegrino opened his mouth. Pellegrino was seated 4 chairs down from Lee, a real estate developer from Long Island, who donated heavily to the Thomas family's charitable foundations, and apparently thought that bought him the right to an eminent opinion on everything. He was loud, red-faced from too much wine, and wearing a suit that cost a fortune but fit him like a sack. He pointed at the cassata with his fork and laughed. That? Seriously? My grandmother used to make that. Peasant food dressed up with fancy plating. The table went quiet. Lee's smile disappeared. One of the security men shifted his weight almost imperceptibly. But it was heroine Noah who spoke, his voice soft and dangerous. What did you say? Pellegrino, too drunk or too stupid to read the room, doubled down. I'm just saying, Don Noah, with all respect, it's cake and cheese. My nonna made it in a basement apartment in Bensonhurst. It's not exactly lustrato non è roba di villano. The words came out of Hannah's mouth before she could stop them. The entire banquet hall went silent. 200 people, frozen, mid-conversation, mid-sip, mid-breath. Hannah's heart stopped. She felt the blood drain from her face as she realized what she'd just done. She'd spoken. Not in English, not even in standard Italian. In Caltabellata dialect, the ancient mountain variant spoken only in a tiny cluster of villages in southwestern Sicily, untouched by modern influence, preserved by families who could trace their bloodlines back 600 years. Families like the Countess. Heroine Noah turned in his chair slowly, like a wolf hearing a sound in the forest that shouldn't exist. His eyes locked onto Hannah with an intensity that made her knees weak. Rippity, he said quietly. Say it again. Hannah's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her tray trembled in her hands. Lee was staring at her now, too, his dark eyes narrowed, calculating. One of the security men had his hand inside his jacket. Vincent appeared at her elbow, his face sheet white, voice panicked and low. Hannah, what the hell are you? Rippity, Noah said again, louder this time. The command of a man who'd spent 70 years making people obey. Hannah's father's voice echoed in her memory. La cultura è l'arma, non la perdi mai. Culture is the weapon, never lose it. She lifted her chin, just slightly, and met heroine Noah's eyes. Lustrato non è roba di villano, she repeated, her voice steadier now. The cassata is not peasant food. It is the food of kings, and any man who disrespects it, disrespects every Sicilian who came before him. The silence that followed could have shattered glass. And then heroine Noah smiled. Heroine Noah's smile didn't reach his eyes. It was the kind of smile that preceded violence or revelation, and Hannah couldn't tell which terrified her more. He lifted one weathered hand and gestured to the empty space beside his chair. Veni ca, pixeridra. Come here, little one. Every instinct Hannah had screamed at her to run, to drop the tray, bolt for the kitchen, disappear into the New York night and never look back. She could be on a bus to Philadelphia within the hour. Boston by morning. Gone. But her feet moved forward. Vincent grabbed her elbow as she passed, his grip desperate. "Hannah, you don't have to." "Let her go," Lee said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade. Vincent's hand dropped immediately. Hannah crossed the marble floor, each step echoing in the suffocating silence. 200 pairs of eyes tracked her movement. She stopped 3 feet from Noah's chair, hands clasped in front of her, head bowed in a show of respect that was half performance, half muscle memory from a childhood spent around men exactly like him. Noah studied her for a long moment. Then he spoke again, and this time his voice carried the weight of something deeper than curiosity. "Dio ni veni? Where are you from?" The question was a trap. Hannah knew it. If she answered in English, she'd mark herself as a fraud, someone who'd learned a few phrases to impress tourists. If she answered in the dialect, she'd confirm what he already suspected, that she wasn't just a waitress who happened to know Old Sicilian. She was someone who'd been raised in it. "Dina famiglia antica," she said quietly. "From an old family." Noah's eyes flickered with something that might have been pain. "Quali famiglia? Which family?" The room held its breath. Lee was watching his father now, his expression unreadable, but Hannah could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand had drifted toward his waist where the gun would be. He didn't understand what was happening, but he understood it mattered. "Na famiglia che non esiste più," Hannah whispered. "A family that no longer exists." Noah closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, they were wet. He reached out and took Hannah's hand in both of his. His skin was rough, scarred, the hands of a man who'd built an empire with violence and will, but his grip was gentle. "Chi aiuto nomu veru?" he asked. "What is your real name?" Hannah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She'd spent 3 years hiding from this moment, and now that it was here, she found she didn't have the strength to lie anymore. Not to this man. Not in this language. "Elena," she breathed. "Elena Conti." The name hung in the air like a gunshot. Someone at a nearby table gasped. Marcus Pellegrino, who'd started this whole disaster, had gone pale as death. Even Lee stiffened, his eyes widening just a fraction. Because everyone in that room knew the name Conti. Everyone knew what had happened to them. Noah's hands tightened around hers, and a sound escaped his throat that was half sob, half laugh. "Vera Matri," he whispered. "Holy Mother, Antonio's Fika, Antonio's Pixarida, Antonio's daughter, Antonio's little girl." He stood abruptly, his cane clattering to the floor, and pulled Hannah into an embrace that smelled like expensive cologne and old tobacco, and something underneath it all that her memory recognized, the same soap her father used to use, the kind you could only get from a specific shop in Palermo. Lee was on his feet now too, his voice sharp with alarm. "Patri, ci sta successu? Father, what's happening?" But Noah didn't answer his son. He just held Hannah tighter, his body shaking, and whispered into her hair in the language of their shared past. "Pensavu che erano tutti morti. Pensavu che t'avevano ammazzato quell'altri. I thought you were all dead. I thought they'd killed you with the others." Noah released her after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. His eyes were red, his hands still trembling as he cupped her face and studied her features like he was trying to reconcile the 9-year-old girl he'd known with the woman standing before him. Lee's voice cut through the moment like ice. "Vincent, clear the room. Everyone out. Now." The coordinator didn't hesitate. Within 3 minutes, the banquet hall was empty except for Lee's security team, Noah and Hannah, who stood frozen in place while her mind raced through escape routes she knew she'd never reach. Lee approached slowly, his footsteps deliberate. He stopped in front of his father, his jaw tight. "Someone want to tell me what the hell is going on?" "I due a fica di Antonio," Noah said, his voice thick with emotion. "She's Antonio's daughter. Antonio Conti?" Lee's eyes snapped to Hannah, and the curiosity from before had been replaced with something much colder. "The Conti family's been dead for 15 years. Evidentemente no tutti," Noah murmured. "Evidently not all of them." Lee's hand shot out and gripped Hannah's upper arm, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to make it clear she wasn't going anywhere. "You, with me, now." He pulled her toward a service door that led to the back hallways, away from his father's protests. Hannah stumbled, trying to keep up with his long strides, as he dragged her through a maze of corridors she barely recognized. They passed the kitchen, Vincent's terrified face appearing in the window for a split second, then down a narrow staircase that descended into the lower level. The wine cellar. Lee shoved the heavy oak door open and pushed Hannah inside. The space was cool, dark, lined floor to ceiling with bottles that cost more than most people made in a year. A single exposed bulb cast harsh shadows across his face as he slammed the door shut and turned to face her. "Talk," he said. "Right now. Who sent you?" Hannah's back hit a wine rack. "Nobody sent me. I'm just... Don't." His voice was lethal. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, planting a hand on either side of her head, caging her in. "Don't insult my intelligence. You've been here 3 years. 3 years, working in a restaurant that happens to host every major player in this city. You speak a dialect that's been dead for half a century. And you just happen to be serving the night my father comes to New York for the first time in 20 years? It's not... The Conti family was wiped out in 2010, Lee continued, his face inches from hers. 14 people dead in one night. Women, children, everyone. It was the bloodiest purge in New York history, and nobody walked away from it. So either you're a liar, or you're something much more dangerous." Hannah's hands were shaking. She could smell his cologne, see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, feel the heat radiating off his body. "I'm not dangerous." "Then what are you? A survivor?" The word hung between them. Lee's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. His voice dropped lower, more controlled. "Who killed your family?" "I don't know." "Bullshit." "I don't know." Hannah's voice cracked. "I was 9 years old. They came in the middle of the night. My father shoved me in a shipping container in our warehouse and told me not to make a sound no matter what I heard. So I didn't. I stayed quiet while they murdered everyone I'd ever loved. And then I stayed quiet for 15 more years because that's what you do when you're the only one left." Lee stared at her, his jaw working. "And you ended up here, at my restaurant, serving my father. I didn't know he'd be here. I didn't know." Hannah's breath hitched. "I've spent 3 years avoiding exactly this. I came to work tonight, and he walked through those doors, and everything I built just ended." "Why didn't you run?" "I tried. My feet wouldn't move." Lee pulled back slightly, his eyes scanning her face like he was searching for cracks in her story. "My father thinks you're Antonio Conti's daughter. Is that true?" Hannah met his gaze. "Yes." "Prove it." She reached slowly into her apron pocket, careful not to make any sudden movements with his security team probably listening on the other side of the door. Her fingers found the small silver chain she'd worn under her uniform for 3 years, the one thing she'd kept from before. She pulled it out. Hanging from the chain was a ring. Old gold worn smooth with an inscription in Sicilian on the inside that read, "Onori e sangue," honor and blood. Lee took it from her hand and held it up to the light. His face went pale. "Where did you get this?" "It was my father's," Hannah whispered. "He gave it to my mother the day they got married. She was wearing it the night she died." Lee's fingers closed around the ring, and for the first time since he'd dragged her down here, he looked uncertain. "Christ," he muttered. "You really are her." Lee pocketed the ring and ran a hand through his hair, pacing the narrow space between the wine racks. Hannah could see him processing, recalculating, trying to figure out what to do with a ghost that had suddenly become flesh and blood. "Does anyone else know who you are?" he asked finally. "No, just your father. And now you. And you've been here 3 years." "Yes." "Working under a fake name." "Yes." "Never caused problems. Never asked questions. Never..." He stopped mid-sentence, his head snapping toward the door. "Do you hear that?" Hannah strained to listen. At first, there was nothing. Then faintly, she heard raised voices from somewhere above them, shouting, the sharp crack of something heavy hitting the floor. Lee's hand went to his waist, pulling the Glock free with practiced ease. "Stay here. Don't move." He was halfway to the door when Hannah's eyes caught something through the small horizontal window near the ceiling, a narrow slice of view into the service corridor that led back to the main hall. A flash of red light, brief, precise, moving across the far wall. Her blood turned to ice. "Wait," she breathed. Lee turned. "What?" Hannah moved toward the window, standing on her toes to get a better angle. The red light appeared again, dancing across the white marble, and this time she saw it clearly. A laser sight, professional grade, tracking movement. "Someone's targeting the banquet hall," she said, her voice sharp with urgency. "There's a rifle sight. I just saw it." Lee was beside her in an instant, his eyes following her line of sight. "Where?" "Upper left. Near the there. Do you see it?" The red dot appeared again, slower this time, sweeping methodically across what Hannah knew was the exact area where the head table sat, where heroine Noah had been sitting when Lee dragged her away. "Murda," Lee hissed. He grabbed his radio. "Marco, this is Thomas. We have a possible shooter. Northwest quadrant. Get my father out of that hall now. Now." Static crackled back. Then Marco's voice, tense. "Boss, we've got a situation up here. Your father won't leave. He's demanding to know where you took the girl. I don't care what he wants. Get him to the..." The window exploded. Not the small one, they were looking at the massive plate glass windows of the banquet hall 2 floors above them. The sound was like thunder, a massive shattering crash followed by screams and the rapid percussion of gunfire. Lee shoved Hannah to the floor, his body covering hers as chunks of plaster rained down from the ceiling. More shots. 6, 7, 8 in quick succession. Then the heavier return fire from his security team. Hannah's ears were ringing. She could taste dust and fear and the metallic edge of adrenaline. Lee was yelling into his radio, but she couldn't make out the words over the chaos. Then, as suddenly as it started, the shooting stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Lee rolled off her and was on his feet instantly, weapon raised, moving toward the door. "Stay down," he ordered. But Hannah was already up, her server instincts overridden by something deeper, something that had watched her family die and refused to let it happen again. Not to Noah, not to anyone. She followed Lee up the stairs. The service hallway was carnage. 2 of Lee's security men were down, one clutching his shoulder, the other not moving. Blood pooled on the white marble. The door to the banquet hall hung off its hinges, smoke drifting through the opening. Lee burst through first, and Hannah was right behind him. The scene inside made her stomach drop. Tables overturned, guests huddled behind columns, and at the center of it all, heroine Noah lay on the floor, his white shirt stained red. 2 of Lee's men crouched over him, applying pressure to a wound in his side. "Patri!" Lee's voice cracked as he ran to his father. Noah's eyes were open, his breathing labored. He reached up with a shaking hand and grabbed Lee's collar. "Non era per mia," he gasped. "It wasn't for me." "What?" "Utiratori. Stava provando di ammazzare tutti." The shooter was trying to kill everyone. Hannah's mind raced. A professional sniper wouldn't miss. Not from that range. Not with that equipment. Which meant Noah was right. This wasn't an assassination. It was a message. And whoever sent it knew exactly who Hannah was. Hannah's eyes swept the banquet hall, her mind working faster than her fear. Overturned tables, shattered crystal. 3 bodies lying motionless near the entrance, guests who'd been caught in the initial volley. But the positioning was wrong. All wrong. If the shooter had wanted Noah dead, he'd be dead. These men didn't miss from 200 yards, which meant the target was still alive. Her gaze snapped to the blown-out windows, calculating angles, sight lines, where a professional would position for a follow-up shot. The northwestern corner offered a clear view of the head table, but the southeastern window, the one still intact, had a perfect line to the service entrance. The entrance Lee had just come through. The entrance she was standing in front of. "Get down!" Hannah screamed. The red dot appeared on Lee's chest. She didn't think. Her body moved on instinct, on 15 years of survival reflexes that had kept her alive when everyone else died. She launched herself forward, her shoulder connecting with Lee's torso just as the crack of the rifle split the air. They hit the ground hard. Lee's gun skittered across the marble. The bullet punched through the space where his head had been half a second earlier and embedded itself in the mahogany paneling with a sick thud. More shots followed. Rapid fire now, the shooter abandoning precision for volume. Windows exploded inward in a cascade of glass. Hannah felt something hot slice across her upper arm but didn't stop moving. She rolled, dragging Lee behind an overturned table as his security team returned fire, their muzzle flashes strobing the room. "Copri you patri!" Lee roared at his men. "Cover my father!" 3 of them formed a human shield around Noah, hauling him toward the kitchen. One took a round to the leg and went down hard, but the others kept moving, their training overriding everything else. Hannah pressed herself flat against the floor, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Beside her, Lee had retrieved his weapon and was scanning for targets, his face a mask of cold fury. "How many shooters?" he snapped. "At least 2, Hannah gasped. Different angles. The first one was northwest, high elevation. This one's southeast, probably the building across the street. Lee's eyes cut to her. "How do you know that?" My father taught me. The words came out before she could stop them. He said, if you want to survive this life, you learn to read a room like it's trying to kill you. Because eventually, it will be. Another burst of gunfire tore through the remaining windows. A chandelier broke free from the ceiling and crashed down, missing them by feet. Screams echoed from the kitchen where the surviving guests had fled. Then, as abruptly as it had started, the shooting stopped again. Lee's radio crackled. Boss, we've got your father secured in the kitchen. He's stable. Bullet went through. Missed anything vital. But we've got 3 civilians down. 2 dead. 1 critical. Lee's jaw clenched. Get him to the car. Route 7. Move now. Copy. He turned to Hannah, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something other than calculation in his eyes. Something that might have been respect. Or maybe just confusion about why a waitress had just saved his life. You tackled me, he said. You were going to die. Why do you care? Hannah looked at him, at this man whose world she'd just destroyed by existing, whose father had held her like a daughter, whose organization might be connected to the slaughter of her family. She should hate him. She should want him dead. But watching that red dot appear on his chest, she'd realized something terrible. She didn't. I don't know, she whispered. Lee stared at her for a long moment. Then he grabbed her uninjured arm and pulled her to her feet. Come on, we're leaving. Where? Somewhere they can't finish what they started. His grip tightened. And then you're going to tell me everything you know about who wanted your family dead. Because whoever pulled these triggers tonight, they just made the same mistake 15 years ago. What mistake? Lee's smile was sharp as a blade. They left Aconti alive. The Thomas compound wasn't what Hannah expected. She'd imagined something fortress-like, all concrete and steel and brutality. Instead, Lee's driver pulled through gates hidden behind a tree line in Westchester, up a winding driveway to a sprawling colonial that looked like it belonged to old money, not blood money. But the armed men patrolling the grounds told a different story. Lee barely spoke during the 40-minute drive. He'd made 3 phone calls in rapid Italian, his voice clipped and lethal, coordinating responses and lockdowns and things Hannah tried not to think about too carefully. His hand stayed on his weapon the entire time. They pulled her out of the car and into a side entrance. The interior was elegant hardwood floors, crown molding, oil paintings that were probably originals. Nothing like the violence they'd just escaped. A woman in scrubs was waiting in what looked like a study, her medical bag already open. He's upstairs, she said to Lee. Stable. I've given him something for the pain, but he's refusing to sleep until he sees her. Lee's eyes cut to Hannah. Get that arm looked at first. The cut wasn't deep, just a graze from flying glass, but the woman cleaned and bandaged it with efficient hands while Lee stood guard by the door, his body coiled like a spring. When she finished, he gestured for Hannah to follow. They climbed a curved staircase to the 2nd floor. The hallway was lined with photographs generations of Thomas men, some in military uniforms, others in suits that spanned decades of changing fashion. Lee stopped at the last door and knocked once before pushing it open. Heroine Noah sat propped up in a 4-poster bed, his torso wrapped in white bandages, his face pale but alert. The moment he saw Hannah, his eyes filled with tears. Trossi, he said hoarsely. Come in. Lee held the door open. Hannah stepped inside, suddenly aware of how small she felt, how exposed. The old man gestured to a chair beside the bed, and she sat, her hands folded in her lap like a child called before a grandfather. Noah reached out and took her hand. His grip was weaker than before, but still warm, still alive. Sedici anni, he whispered. 15 years. Sedici anni e non sapia che eri viva. 15 years, and I didn't know you were alive. I didn't know if you were looking for me, Hannah said quietly. I didn't know if you were part of it. Noah's face crumpled. No, Antonio era como un fratipi mia. No, never. Antonio was like a brother to me. Then where were you? The question came out sharper than she intended. 2 days before they came, you left. You disappeared. My father kept asking where you'd gone. And then, Ti sashu. I know. Noah's voice broke. Ti sashu em haju visutu tutti, I giorna di sta vita maledetta. I know, and I've lived with it every day of this cursed life. Lee moved closer, his expression unreadable. What happened that night, Patri? You've never told me the full story. Noah closed his eyes, his chest rising and falling with labored breaths. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. There was a meeting. In Chicago. Antonio and I were supposed to go together. But 2 days before, I got a call. Anonymous. A voice I didn't recognize. He told me if I went to that meeting, my entire family would be dead before I got home. Hannah's blood went cold. He said the contests were finished, that there was a contract out on everyone with the name, that the only way my family survived was if I stayed away from Antonio, cut all ties, and never looked back. Noah's tears slid down his weathered cheeks. Idu mi fici skegiri. Ami famiglia. Oaso. He made me choose. My family or his. And you chose yours, Hannah whispered. Iu sugnu unvigliaku. I am a coward. Noah's grip on her hand tightened. I thought if I stayed away, maybe they'd spare him. Maybe it was just a threat. But I was wrong. They killed everyone. And I have lived with that weight every day since. Lee's voice was hard. Who made the call? I don't know. I've spent 15 years trying to find out. Noah looked at his son. Ma idu sapia kozi kasulu iue Antonio sapiamu. But he knew things that only Antonio and I knew. What things? Hannah asked. Noah's eyes met hers, and in them she saw a fear that had nothing to do with bullets or blood. You segretu di Caltabellota. The secret of Caltabellota. The room went silent. What secret? Lee demanded. Noah's hand trembled. Your father didn't die for territory or money or pride, Pixaridra. He died because he knew where the old families buried their insurance. Bank accounts. Blackmail material. Evidence that could destroy every organization in New York. He paused. I idumi disioni era. And he told me where it was. Hannah's heart stopped. Where? None tiu disi mai. He never told me. Noah's voice was anguished. Idu disi kayu scrivian codici. Kasulu na konti putiria ligirilu. He said he wrote it in code, that only a Conti could read it. Hannah felt the weight of understanding settle on her shoulders like chains. That's why they killed my family, she breathed. They were looking for the code. Iora sanu katusi viva, Noah whispered. And now they know you're alive. Lee's face had gone dark. Tonight wasn't about killing us. It was about flushing her out. They succeeded, Hannah said hollowly. Noah squeezed her hand one last time. Ma ora non si sola beda. Ora hana famiga. But now you're not alone, beautiful. Now you have a family. Lee paced the room like a caged animal, his mind visibly working through implications and threats. If they know she's alive, they'll come for her again, harder this time. Puru sinavemu tuttu tempiu du munnu, Noah said weakly. Even if we have all the time in the world. Irivinu stanotti. They're coming tonight. Hannah's thoughts raced back to her apartment in Queens. The drawer she never opened, the 3 photographs facing down, and beneath them, wrapped in oilcloth and hidden under a false bottom she'd constructed herself, the one thing she'd salvaged from the fire, her father's journal. I have something, she said quietly. Both men turned to look at her. My father kept a journal. He wrote in it every day. I have it. Lee stopped pacing. Where? My apartment. Astoria. It's hidden. But, she met his eyes. If what your father says is true, if my father really did write the location in code, it might be in there. Might? Lee's tone was sharp. I never read it. Hannah's voice dropped. I was 9 years old when he died. I grabbed it from his office during the fire because it smelled like him. Like his cologne and his tobacco and everything I was losing. But I couldn't. Her throat tightened. I couldn't read it. It would have made it real. Noah made a soft sound of understanding. Lee's expression didn't soften, but something shifted in his eyes. We go now, he said. Marco. One of the security men appeared in the doorway. Boss. Get a team. We're going to Astoria. Full tactical. Assume hostiles in the area. 20 minutes later, Hannah sat in the back of an armored SUV with Lee beside her and 4 heavily armed men in tactical gear surrounding them in 2 additional vehicles. The drive back into the city felt surreal, like moving through a dream where the normal rules of reality had been suspended. Her studio apartment looked pathetically small when they arrived. Lee's team swept it in under 2 minutes, checking closets and under the bed and behind the shower curtain like they expected assassins to be hiding in her threadbare towels. Clear, Marco reported. Hannah moved to the corner where her mattress sat on the floor. She pulled it back, revealing the plain floorboards beneath. Lee watched as she counted 3 boards from the wall, then pressed down on the edge until it popped up, revealing the shallow space beneath. The journal was exactly where she'd left it. Leather-bound, worn at the edges, her father's initials embossed on the cover. A. C. Antonio Conti. Her hands shook as she pulled it out. Lee was beside her immediately. "Open it!" Hannah sat on the floor, the journal in her lap, and turned to the first page. Her father's handwriting stared back at her, confident, precise, the loops and curves as familiar as her own face. The text was in Italian, but scattered throughout were phrases in cultibalata dialect, and others in what looked like random letter combinations. Code. She flipped through the pages, scanning entries about business deals and family dinners and her mother's laugh and her own dance recital. Normal life documented by a man who was anything but normal. And then, 3 weeks before the massacre, the entries changed. The handwriting became tighter, more urgent. The codes appeared more frequently. "Qualcuno sta cercando un segreto," she read aloud, translating as she went. "Someone is looking for the secret. N'hai udito a Noah che c'è protetto, che solo una Conti può trovare chiddu che cercano." I told Noah I've protected it, that only a Conti can find what they're looking for. Lee leaned closer. "Keep going." Hannah turned the page. Her father's final entry was dated 2 days before he died. "Sistu giornu legi chistu, figia mia voli diri ka sugnu mortu, voli diri ka tahaju falutu." If you're reading this, my daughter, it means I'm dead. It means I failed you. Her vision blurred. "Ma non t'aiu lasciato senza armi. U segretu en locu nisulutu può andare. Locu ka tutu munnu kanushi ma nuddu vidi." But I didn't leave you defenseless. The secret is in a place only you can go. A place everyone knows but no one sees. Hannah's breath caught. He's talking in riddles. Can you solve it? She kept reading, her mind working through the layers of meaning her father had always loved. "Cerca u locu anni a cultura invece di sangu. Cerca a casa di lomu casi a biscritu a storia." Look for the place where culture won, not blood. Look for the house of the man who wrote our history. "What does that mean?" Lee demanded. Hannah's mind raced through her childhood, through lessons her father had drilled into her about their family history, their culture, their heritage. And then, suddenly, she had it. Lampedusa, she breathed. Giuseppe Tomasi di Lampedusa. The writer. The one who wrote The Leopard. The book? No. Hannah looked up at Lee, her heart pounding. "The house. There's a museum in Palermo. The Palazzo Lampedusa. My father took me there when I was 7. He said it was the most important place in Sicily because it proved that stories were more powerful than bullets." She flipped back through the journal, looking for more clues, and found a string of numbers that had seemed random before. "These aren't coordinates. They're," she calculated quickly, "they're library catalog numbers." He hid something in the museum's archive. Lee pulled out his phone. "Marco, I need a team in Palermo. Now. Palazzo Lampedusa Museum." He paused. "And find out who has access to that building. I want names, backgrounds, connections." His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his face went white. "What?" Hannah asked. Lee turned the phone toward her. It was a message from an unknown number, but the text was clear. "The accountant sends his regards. The old man was right. You should have chosen your family over his. Now neither survives the night." Below it was a photo. Marcus Devine, the real estate developer who'd insulted the Casata at dinner, standing in what looked like a security feed, except he was wearing tactical gear and holding a rifle. The same rifle that had fired into the banquet hall. "Marcus the accountant," Lee said, his voice deadly quiet. "He's been on my father's advisory board for 8 years. He handles our offshore accounts, our shell corporations, he stopped. He has access to everything." Hannah's stomach dropped. "And he knows we're here." As if on cue, the window exploded inward. Lee's body slammed into Hannah's before the first bullet cleared the window frame. They hit the floor in a tangle of limbs as glass rained down around them. Marco and his team were already returning fire, their muzzle flashes lighting up the tiny apartment like lightning. "Vi!" Marco shouted. "Go!" Lee hauled Hannah to her feet and shoved her toward the door. The journal clutched against her chest. They burst into the hallway as bullets chewed through the drywall behind them. One of Lee's men took point, another covered their rear, and they moved like a trained unit down the stairs and out into the alley where the vehicles waited. "He's tracking us," Lee said as they peeled out into traffic. "He has to be. He knew exactly where we were." Hannah's mind was still reeling. Marcus Devine, the loud, drunk real estate developer who'd insulted the Casata, who'd triggered this entire nightmare by disrespecting her father's culture. Except it hadn't been an accident. He'd wanted her to react, wanted her to expose herself. He wasn't drunk tonight, she said suddenly. At dinner. I thought he was, but he wasn't. He was performing. Lee's jaw tightened. He's been playing us for years. The question is who he's really working for. Your father said, the Calabrese family. The Calabreses don't have this kind of reach. Someone bigger is backing them. Lee's phone rang. He answered on speaker. Talk to me. It was one of his tech people, voice tight with urgency. Boss, we tracked Divine's financials. He's got accounts in the Caymans, Switzerland, and Singapore. All opened in the last 3 years. Combined total of $40 million. Lee's knuckles went white on the armrest. Source? Wire transfers from a shell corporation based in Palermo. Registered owner is a pause. This doesn't make sense. Say it. It's registered to Antonio Conti. Hannah felt the air leave her lungs. That's impossible. My father died 15 years ago. Someone's been using his identity, Lee said. Someone who knew enough about him to forge documents, create accounts, build an entire financial empire using his name. His eyes cut to Hannah. Someone who wanted to make sure that if anyone ever found the secret your father hid, it would lead back to a dead man. The pieces clicked into place in Hannah's mind like a lock tumbling open. They're not just looking for the location. They're trying to frame my father. Make it look like he stole from the families before he died. That way, even if the truth comes out, no one will believe it. And if you show up claiming to be his daughter, I become the heir to a fortune built on betrayal. Hannah's voice was hollow. No one will protect me. Every family in New York will want me dead. Lee's phone buzzed again. This time it was a video message. He opened it, and Marcus Divine's face filled the screen. He was in what looked like a warehouse, surrounded by armed men, and he was smiling. Lee, Marcus said, his voice cheerful. I assume you've figured it out by now. I've been liquidating your father's assets for the last 6 hours. By morning, the Thomas organization will be bankrupt, and the Countess will take the fall. It's poetic, really. The sins of the father visited upon the daughter. He leaned closer to the camera. But I'm a reasonable man. Send me the girl and the journal, and I'll let your father live out his remaining years in peace. Keep them, and I'll make sure everyone you've ever loved dies screaming. You have 2 hours. The video ended. The SUV was silent except for the hum of the engine and the distant wail of sirens. Hannah stared at her father's journal, at the worn leather cover, at the secrets contained in his careful handwriting. I'll go, she said quietly. No. He'll kill your father. He'll destroy everything you've built. I'm not worth... Lee grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. His eyes were dark fire. Listen to me very carefully. Marcus Divine is a dead man. He just doesn't know it yet. And you... His grip softened. You're not running anymore. Lee, my father loved yours like a brother. That means something in our world. That means your family, whether you want to be or not. He released her. But I'm not going to force you to stay. When this is over, I'll give you enough money to disappear anywhere in the world. New identity, new life, complete protection. You can walk away from all of this. Hannah looked down at the journal, at her father's initials, at the legacy of violence and secrets and impossible choices that came with the name Conti. She thought about 3 years of invisibility, 3 years of being nobody, 3 years of surviving but never living. And she thought about heroine Noah's tears, about Lee's body covering hers when the bullets flew, about the way her father's dialect had felt in her mouth after so many years of silence, like coming home. Or, she asked, Lee's expression was unreadable. Or you stay. You help me find what your father hid. You help me burn Marcus Divine and everyone who helped him to the ground. And then, he paused, then you help me build something different. The old families are dying because they're stuck in the past. But someone who understands both worlds, who speaks the old language but sees the new possibilities. You want me to be a bridge. I want you to be yourself, Lee said. Elena Conti, daughter of Antonio, the last of her line, not hiding, not running, standing in the light and daring anyone to try and take what's hers. Hannah felt something shift inside her chest, something that had been locked away for 15 years, wrapped in grief and fear and the desperate need to disappear. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. La cultura è l'arma, piquiridra, nuna perdi mai. Culture is the weapon, little one. Never lose it. She'd spent 3 years losing herself. Maybe it was time to be found. Hannah looked up and met Lee's eyes. When do we leave for Palermo? Lee's smile was sharp and dangerous and full of promise. 2 hours. right after we deal with Marcus. It's how the same way the old families always dealt with traitors. He pulled his gun and checked the chamber. We remind him why you don't betray a Thomas. Hannah clutched her father's journal tighter. And after, Lee said. We show the world what happens when you leave a Conti alive. The SUV turned onto the highway, heading toward whatever came next. And for the first time in 15 years, Hannah Jambalena Conti wasn't running away from her past. She was running straight toward it, with claws. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right